Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this virtual professional development opportunity. My name is Joe Schmitz, and I'm the Social Studies Specialist and Acting Coordinator of Secondary Education for the Maine Department of Education. I'm happy to be joined today by Kayla and Caitlin. You're going to learn a little bit more. They're going to introduce themselves in just a moment. Kayla and Caitlin are here from EVERFI, and they're going to talk to us about using the power of technology to build culturally responsive classrooms. And EVERFI has a bunch of free resources in order to do this in your classroom. And so Kayla and Caitlin are going to walk you through those resources, show you how to use them, show you how to get logged on. They're going to have all the information you could possibly need with this. So without any further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Kayla and Caitlin to introduce themselves and take us the rest of the way.
Thank you so much, Joe. Hello, everyone. And thank you for joining us today for our session on best practices for culturally relevant teaching in Maine. My name is Kayla Boyer, and I'll be leading this session in conjunction with my colleague, Caitlin, who I'll be introducing to you shortly. We find ourselves in a moment where the dialogue about diversity, equity, and inclusion is happening across the nation. And as we prepare for addressing these conversations in our classrooms, it's important to equip ourselves with a framework and strategies to help feel prepared. Educators will leave this session with an awareness of the culturally relevant teaching framework, as well as strategies to create opportunities for deeper classroom conversations surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion. You will also gain access to digital resources, as well as a classroom culture toolkit, complete with lessons, activities, and relevant articles at the end of the session. So let's go into our agenda. I'm going to start with introductions and norms, and Caitlin's going to then explain what culturally relevant teaching is and recommend a few techniques that can help to create an inclusive classroom. Next, she's going to go into the importance of psychological safety. And finally, I'll discuss how to access EVERFI's digital resources to support culturally relevant teaching and how to get started this upcoming school year. While all thoughts and insights might not be readily useful, we do hope it will spark some ideas around what can be done to cultivate a culture of respect. All right, for introductions. So as I mentioned earlier, my name is Kayla Boyer. I'm a senior schools manager at EVERFI. I live in Dover, New Hampshire, right on the border of Maine. I frequent Maine very often, and I work with educators closely in Maine to train and support them with EVERFI's digital resources. I'm also a mom to a very lively 8-year-old daughter, and being that I am biracial, I'm very passionate about teaching not just my own daughter, but all children to respect and celebrate the differences in all people. I'm also joined today by my colleague, Caitlin, who I'll allow her to introduce herself.
Thanks, Kayla. Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin Gales. I am EVERFI's manager for diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. I am coming to you from Denver, Colorado. So very excited to be with you all here today. And prior to my role here at EVERFI as the manager of DEI programs, I served in a similar role as Kayla, supporting educators throughout Colorado. Culturally relevant teaching is very near and dear to my heart, so I'm very excited to dive in.
Awesome. All right, but before we dive in, I did want to give you all a brief overview of who we are at EVERFI. Put in the chat if you've already used EVERFI, heard of EVERFI, or if you're just a completely new user. I'd love to know. But some things so we are teaching students about critical skills. So the things that might not be taught in necessarily an ELA or math setting, but they need to be successful in their lives. So topics like financial literacy, social emotional learning, and of course, cultural literacy, which is what we'll be discussing today. So we're able to provide all of these resources at no cost to our educators because we find partners that care about our mission and will support these resources. And also, everything you're going to receive in this session is free, and you'll get access to them at the end of this course or at the end of this session. So EVERFI does offer so many years of expertise. We have 15 years of experience in digital education, and we've also partnered with subject matter experts to help in developing our content and align our resources with state and national standards. So if you want to know more about those state standards that are aligned, feel free to contact me. Lastly, all educators have access to a local implementation manager, such as myself. I am local. You can call my 603 number, not a 1-800 number. You can always text me, email me directly at any time with any questions about implementation. Any questions about EVERFI? And if you do have them, feel free to put them in the Q&A or the chat. All right. Now, before we get started, I'd like to get a pulse check regarding your comfort level with culturally relevant teaching. Is this something you're very comfortable with at a 4 or somewhat comfortable with at a 2? Feel free to chat that in just so we can get a pulse check regarding, do you teach culturally relevant teaching now? Is this completely new to you? Love to see how you're feeling. And Caitlin, if you wanted to maybe share out with what folks are typing in.
Yeah, so we're seeing some a majority of 2s, some 3s. And I think, regardless of where you are in terms of comfort, you'll definitely pick up some new techniques, maybe some new information, and then also the resources that we're going to provide, I think will really help you with your sense of comfort. So seeing a lot of 2s. We're definitely at least going to bump you all up to 3s today.
Yes, by the end of this, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'll let Caitlin take it off with the creating shared norms.
Thank you. So I wanted to start off by talking about shared norms. And so this is something that you all can use in your classroom. And I'm not going to go over all of them, but I do think a couple should be highlighted that really create some central themes. So the first one is right in the center here on that top row, which is think well of each other. And think well of each other also really kind of impacts address the ideas and not the person, and avoid assumptions and ask questions. So when we're thinking about this, and we can either set this, as the stage for our conversation, but also think about using this in the classroom with your students. Thinking well of each other is recognizing that we each come into this, this space with different lived experiences, right? We all have the intention of, bumping up our comfort, learning more. And so there may be times where, you are confused, you may ask a clarifying question, and maybe that question sounds a little odd, right? We want to address the idea, not the person. We want to avoid assumptions because we're all coming from our own experience. We're all seeing things in a different way. And sometimes all it takes is just asking, what did you mean by that? Right? So if someone asks something, you're not really sure, think well of the person and just kind of dig in deeper and, ask those clarifying questions. So think well of each other is the first one. The next one, and I think probably the most important in really everything that we are doing, is understand the difference between intent versus impact, right? So this is kind of a well-used anecdote. If we're walking down the street and I step on your foot and you say, ouch, that really hurt. And I say, well, get over it. That wasn't my intent. I didn't intend to hurt you. Your foot still hurts, right? We have to recognize that even when we may have very harmless intentions, it could have harmful impacts. And so we want to remove the center around intent and really focus on impact, right? So if I had stepped on your foot and instead of, you telling me, ouch, that really hurt. And I said, I'm so sorry. I recognize that I stepped on your foot and now it's hurting. You are much more likely to kind of come to reconciliation more quickly because your needs were centered, right? So intent versus impact is really important. And it's one that takes some work, right, to get used to, because we don't want to be seen as kind of like the bad person or the person that's hurt someone. And it's understandable if we activate that growth mindset and say, without even meaning to, I may have an impact on someone. I think it's a little bit easier to kind of come to that recognition. And then finally, and I think this is why, so react minimally and act maximally. So it's at the very bottom here. When someone does something, right? If someone says something that maybe brings up an uncomfortable emotion, it's important to take a minute and step back, right? When we're trying to have these difficult conversations, things can become, emotional very quickly. It's important for you and for your students to take a moment, recognize the emotion, name the emotion before just kind of jumping into anger, right? All of these different emotions. And we have some resources within social emotional learning that can really help students recognize and name that. So those are some of the norms that I think are really important. And if we want to go into the next slide, Just a quick activity. I think this is a great one to use with your students, and we're going to do it very quickly here. But I want you to write down 2 things. You can either do this mentally, you can share it in the chat, but write down 2 things that someone can tell about you just by looking at you. So for example, right, I've got brown hair. You can see that just by looking at me, and I wear glasses. So what are 2 things that people can see just by looking at you? And then I also want you to think about or write down 2 things that people would not be able to tell just by looking at you. So for example, I'm an only child, right? So no one just walking down the street is going to say, that girl's an only child, unless they see that I'm not like sharing my favorite foods, which then, they may be able to tell, right? And then the other thing is you're not going to be able to look at me and just very simply realize, oh, she's got a master's degree in education, right? Unless I'm wearing a shirt that says that, you would have no idea, right? So think about those things, right? What do people really kind of already ascribe to you, and what don't they know? And so why is this important? And Kayla, if you just want to like hit that, the arrow one more time. Why is this important? It's important because individualism is seen and it is unseen, right? So we see with our eyes, but we also see with our experiences. We see with our biases. We see with our fear. And so when you're doing this activity, it can help students kind of recognize, oh, there's a lot of things I don't know about the person sitting next to me. There's a lot of things I don't know about the teacher who is teaching me. And therefore, I should probably, develop more of an open mind, and you can start to develop that culture of tolerance and acceptance into your classrooms. So this is a great intro activity. Feel free to use it. I think it's really easy, but something that gets students' minds thinking about kind of breaking out of their standard box. So let's dive into that next slide. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this. We know why, right? We need to have diversity, equity, and inclusion education. I will share. So last year we had a conference called Learn On. We're doing it again this year. We surveyed teachers and asked, what are some of the most pressing needs that you see in your classroom? And 80% of our teachers said that diversity and inclusion was one of the top pressing issues that they were thinking about in their classroom, right? They also said it was a school priority, so something that the school was telling them that they needed to start focusing on. But 87% of teachers said that they were unprepared, which is understandable. This is, sometimes a very vulnerable topic, right? And when things are vulnerable, they're often very scary. So we see the need at the teacher level, but we can also see the need at the student level. If we want to advance one slide, we are seeing that students are asking for this curriculum. Students are taking a really, really vested interest in learning more about different cultures and seeing more equitable curriculum. So for example, here in Denver, there was a set of high school students who frankly said like they wanted to learn more about different cultures. They wanted to really dive deeper into cultural literacy. So they developed a group. They met with the principal. The principal said, you know what, you're right. And they overhauled the curriculum for their school simply because the students said, I want to learn more about this. And how often, right, do we get to see students get really, really excited about what they're learning? And so if they're excited, it is our job to bring those resources to them. So that is why it is so necessary to have culturally relevant teaching. But what is it, right? So what is culturally relevant teaching? And we can actually just go into the next slide. So it's difficult because culturally relevant teaching cannot be just boiled down into a checklist, right? It can't be like, okay, if you're doing this, that, and this, you are a culturally relevant teacher. And the reason why it can't be boiled down is because it is very much, it relies on context. It relies on the context of who your students are. What is the, broader aspect of your community, right? What's going on in your community? And what are some of the bigger kind of social contexts that are going into your curriculum? So in terms of kind of what are the pillars, right? So rather than having a checklist, let's think about this as a pillar. So if you are holding high academic expectations for yourself and your students, if you are just really taking the effort, frankly, to understand that your own worldview and that your understanding may be very different than your students, and if you are willing to acknowledge inequity, you are starting to really dive into the main pillars of culturally relevant teaching. So it's looking at who is sitting in your classroom and recognizing that their needs may be different because of their lived experience. And so you cannot focus on one of these pillars without focusing on another. And frankly, you are likely already doing this in your classroom. You know, educators are often wondering, who is sitting in my classroom? How can I get to know them better? And that is really kind of the first step in culturally relevant teaching. And we can actually, you know, in the next slide, we can go over some of the strategies. And once again, very basic stuff, right? So if we want to hit, there we go. So activate students' prior knowledge, right? As I said before, and as we know, students walk in with their own experiences. So if you can encourage students to draw on their prior knowledge, they're able to make connections between what they already know and what they're learning. So that's a big one. Make learning contextual. So think about, you know, a lot of times when you're learning about these big concepts, you're thinking, this has nothing to do with me. So how can you bring this to their front door, right? What's going on in the community? How can you make this relevant to them? It's also about, you know, encouraging students to leverage the capital that they already have. So once again, right, those experiences that they're having, how can they use those experiences to have a voice in the classroom? And this looks like, you know, encouraging students and giving them a platform, but not calling on them to simply speak for everyone, right? So if you have a specific makeup of a classroom, and this happened to me many a time in high school when I went to a predominantly white high school. I am in an mainly only white classroom for social studies, and slavery comes up, right? All eyes on me. I have no idea, right? I'm learning with everyone else. But so that's where the difference can happen, right? So it's recognizing that students may have lived experiences that they want to share, but not putting the pressure on them to share them because they may be the only one in the classroom. So it's a careful balance there, and it's one that you should, you know, first I'll kind of jump over. You should build a relationship with the student so that they feel that they have that platform in order to share those experiences. And then finally, reconsider your classroom setup. So look around at your classroom and who is featured? What books are featured, right? Is it kind of mainly one person or one type of person? Is your classroom reflective of the kids in your class? And I think when kids can see just on the walls, right, they can see someone that looks like them, they can see someone that they identify with, it's already kind of, you know, breaking that ice, feeling like they have a voice here, they have a place here. So all of these things actually go into a concept called psychological safety. So what is psychological safety? So it was developed by Amy Edmondson. She is a Harvard Business School professor, and she did this massive study on highly functional versus low functional teams. And so this essentially started first as kind of a corporate study. And basically what she found was highly functional teams have a strong degree of psychological safety. So psychological safety is the belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. And while this started off as kind of a corporate idea, we can absolutely see where this happens in the classroom, right? If students feel that their voices are heard, that they can just, you know, speak up and not be made fun of when they, you know, maybe say something wrong, they are going to feel more adventurous. They are going to feel more excited, and they are going to want to contribute to the classroom. If they are in a classroom where they feel that anything that they say is wrong, if they feel that they are being humiliated, they are not going to participate, right? They're going to check out, and they're not going to see this as relevant to them. So I would say, whether you are, you know, on a team, you're in the classroom, psychological safety is what you should really be centering and focusing on. You know, do my students feel like if they raise their hand, they will be celebrated for what they say? They will, you know, if they make a mistake, it won't be the thing that they, you know, stay up and think about every night. That's what psychological safety is. And so a few tips for psychological safety is one, lead by example. Admit when you make mistakes, right? Say, oh, I got that wrong. I don't know. Lead by example. Encourage active listening. This one's tough for high school students, right? They've got a lot going on. So try to reduce distractions if you can. Create a safe environment as much as you can, right? So starting with those norms, that's a great way to do that, right? Set some ground rules for your students to let them know that you have their back and that you're going to make sure that everyone is treated with respect. And then finally, develop an open mindset. And this is both for the student and for you. So you have to remember, we all have we're coming into the classroom with, all different experiences. Remind students of that and really encourage them to break up with judgment. If their first thought when someone raises their hand is like, not this person again, right? Encourage them to break up with that judgment, and really actively encourage everyone to talk. You may have that one student that's always like, I've got it, I've got it, I've got it. Encourage the student that doesn't talk often, and really try to make sure that they recognize that their voice is valued as well. So that is psychological safety. I encourage you, I know the school year is kind of starting to end, and so you may not have plans yet, but I would love to hear, what's one thing that you have seen so far that you would love to incorporate in your classroom? It can be something really easy, like I'm going to look at my posters and, maybe do a little bit of a refresh, but would love to hear what you all are thinking in terms of how would you shift some things in your classroom to develop psychological safety and, encourage culturally relevant teaching.
Thanks, Caitlin. I want to hear as well. So any ideas, please put them in the chat, and we may read them towards the end of the presentation. But I'm going to now take the last half of Amy already has an idea. Awesome. You want to get more decorations for your classroom, expand your classroom library. Love that. So I'm going to now take the last part of the presentation to share with you some of these blended learning resources to help create a culturally responsive classroom. Just so we're clear, EVERFI's diversity, equity, and inclusion suite of courses are designed to encourage deeper learning around setting behavioral goals to build inclusive communities. So it's important to note that while EVERFI's courses do address the concepts of stereotypes, bias, and privilege, we address these subjects broadly and objectively and do not ascribe to actions or beliefs to a particular demographic, such as racial or gender identity. So while we might discuss examples of improper stereotyping in action, our courses do not say or imply that a particular race perpetuates these stereotypes. Okay, so EVERFI offers a variety of resources. As you can see, it's not just diversity, equity, and inclusion. We offer financial education, we offer STEM, social emotional learning, health and wellness, and early literacy. For the purposes of this session, we are going to focus on the courses that teach diversity, equity, and inclusion. But if you are interested in learning more about our other topic areas, feel free to contact me. I'm going to have my contact information at the end of this presentation, or we can have a one-on-one discussion. Loving everything that's happening in the chat right now too, which I think we will definitely address at the end of this presentation. Just want to make sure we get through this all. All right, so the first course I wanted to talk about is our Diversity Foundations for High School. This introduces learners to key concepts of identity, bias, power, privilege, and oppression. This course establishes the importance of ally behavior, self-care, and creating inclusive spaces. So there are 5 mobile-friendly digital lessons, and they last about 20 minutes each. So the course can really be finished in less than a couple hours. EVERFI partners with experts and thought leaders in the field to inform the development and continued maintenance of our courses. So we specifically partnered with the DEI Advisory Council, comprised of subject matter experts like Sheree Marlowe, the Chief Officer of Diversity and Inclusion at Clark University, and Monroe France, who is the Associate Vice President for Global Engagement and Inclusive Leadership at NYU, New York University. And there are various associations we also collaborated with to create this content, such as the Power of We. So key lesson elements, there's student point of view videos, which I think are really powerful because it connects the course content to lived experiences, making it more real for students. So there are communication workshops where students are able to look at different scenarios and situations and challenge their own assumptions and biases and think about how they might respond in different situations. They also are taking what they learned and applying it. And then there's Jose's story. So in this, it starts out in the first lesson, and it's a narrative arc that goes throughout the first 4 lessons of the course. So it's a video with interactivity built in. It's a group of college students who are starting out living together at the beginning of the school year with Jose. And then we learn that Jose decides to drop out of school because of some challenging situations that he went through. And the course prompts you to make certain decisions to change the outcome so that Jose doesn't decide to drop out of school. And that's where that interactivity piece comes into play. I think it's important to highlight the communications workshop in this course because they come through towards the end of every lesson, and it's an opportunity for kids to apply what they learned in situations. So students are going to learn how stereotypes can sometimes lead to wrong assumptions. For example, a student may learn that just because 2 kids in their study group have the same last names and they're both Latina doesn't mean that they're necessarily related. So really kind of challenging those assumptions. There's another one on inclusion strategies and another one on, is this person's comment problematic, and getting them to think. And then they can read through the different outcomes based on how they respond to that. And then all of our courses also come with some additional resources found in your teacher dashboard, which I'm going to show you at the end of this presentation. I'm going to highlight a lot of them, but in particularly this Diversity Foundations course, you're going to get a course outline and a curriculum guide, which will break down all the topics covered, as well as a facilitator guide with offline lesson plans, discussion questions, a parent letter introducing the course to parents, as well as standard alignment. This facilitator guide is super robust. It does provide all the background and research that went into making this program. There's a bunch of videos to play in the classroom. So I highly recommend checking out those offline lesson plans in your teacher resources center, which I'm going to show you in just a moment. We also curated a list of additional resources into what we called an anti-racism guide, which helps educators explore anti-racism, bias, privilege, and more with self-paced professional development, articles, podcasts and book suggestions, videos on what white allyship looks like, for example, and various lessons and activities to apply the knowledge of race and equity to use in your classroom. So all of the attendees of this presentation will be receiving this anti-racism teaching guide, which Joe had mentioned earlier he's going to link. All right, next course. So our 306 African American History course allows students and educators to establish a strong foundation of Black history, creating the opportunity for deeper conversations surrounding race and equity. So it also paves a path to explore how African American history is a critical part of American history story. So this course provides a summary overview of Black history through 17 mini lessons. I know it says 15, we've actually added a couple. Each mini lesson focuses on key figures in Black history, weaving vignettes, interactive text activities, and assessments to reinforce and engage students' understanding of key concepts. I will say all of our 5 courses will assess students' progress. So even that diversity course that I had just shown you, there are quizzes along the way. Educators are also going to have the option of having students complete a capstone essay at the end of this particular program, from outline to composition, and using a primary source in an essay topic from the 306 course itself. So it really creates this strong foundation of Black history and can serve as a springboard for in-depth classroom conversations on race and equity. We've created, just like DEI, we have a slate of offline resources to have these conversations further, turnkey lesson plans, inviting students to continue exploring Black history, and video lists and reading suggestions for families as well. So the significance of 306, why that number? If anybody can chat it in before I say it, feel free. But the number 306 has occurred several times in African-American history. It is the date the Supreme Court handed down their decision on Dred Scott versus Sanford, which held that Black people could not be considered American citizens and rights and privileges afforded to Americans were not for Black people. Group 306 was a group founded by Charles Alston during the Harlem Renaissance, and this group consists of artists, scholars, and writers to support intellectual and creative expression in the Black community. Finally, room 306 was Dr. King's preferred room in the Lorraine Motel where he was assassinated in 1968. So like the course itself, the name 306 points to a full spectrum of African-American history, both the beautiful and tragic, and illustrates the need for creativity, perseverance, and learning from the past. So one of the most unique parts of 306 is the feature of interactive text students can parse through so that they can strengthen their reading comprehension. Students are challenged to analyze the intent and impact of these primary sources within the scope of Black history. In the example featured, this is an excerpt from Frederick Douglass's book, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, where he talks about how he was taught the ABCs by the wife of a slave owner, and then began to teach other enslaved people how to read. So students are challenged to find answers to specific questions within the excerpt. For example, select the phrase that contrasts Mr. Auld's view with Douglass's goals, and students would select the paragraph that begins with what he most dreaded that I most desired, what he most loved that I most hated. Also, to help with comprehension, the words you see in red are defined when students hover over the text. Okay, so another cool feature in this course are interactive maps that are woven into the content. So this is an example taken from part of the course that covers the Montgomery bus boycotts in Montgomery, Alabama. So students are going to learn about Dexter Baptist Church, where MLK was a pastor and served as a center for the bus boycott, as well as MLK's house, which was attacked. So they are going to learn attacked in retaliation due to the anger surrounding the bus boycott. So it really reminds students that Black history can be found around every corner and on every street. All right. So I'm now going to explain the various authors and texts in 306. So you're going to see here a variety right here of different types of authors that influenced the course. So Phyllis Wheatley, for example, and as well as W.E. Du Bois, The Crisis, Zora Neale Hurston, and Langston Hughes, and as well as Booker T. Washington, Up from Slavery, and Bayard Rustin, The Demands of the March, from March on Washington. Right. So in this course, you are going to see, I had explained earlier that we have a bunch of offline resources for this course. So you're going to see them available in the teacher resources section. After completing 306 African American history, students will have learned about key historical figures and events up until Mae Jemisin's spaceflight in 1992. So we're creating an optional extension activity where students will get the chance to extend the timeline of Black history from the 1990s all the way to the present. So in part one of the activities, students are going to create a timeline like the one shown here, outlining 12 major moments in modern Black history. So they'll choose one key Black figure that is associated with that moment in time, and they're going to write 2 to 3 sentences about the influence that person and the event had on that event. And in the Black community and their impact on American history. So in the second part of the lesson, students are going to write a paragraph comparing and contrasting the historical events and key Black figures they learned about in 306 with more recent events. And this definitely ties in the past to the present. The aim of the activity is to bring the course into the present moment and to let learners discover that Black history is truly American history. And we also are making sure that this lesson can be taught in both an in-person and remote learning setting. Very important for this last school year, especially. All right, so that was our flagship 306 course. So we have recently come out with a 306 Continuing the Story. And this course is, again, for grades 8 through 12. It's designed to integrate social studies, US history, and ELA curriculum. So it can be taught in conjunction with teaching about Black history in the post-civil rights era, or as an independent lesson. These interactive modules are going to help students understand the history of events that have shaped the experience of many Black people in the US. They're going to place an emphasis on many firsts that Black leaders have accomplished in the business and medical fields, while also highlighting Black professionals who have blazed trails, made significant contributions to their respective sectors, and looking closely at events in post-civil rights era the US. Students are going to have an increased awareness, appreciation, and visibility of Black leaders. All right, I now want to go into the course itself. As with all our courses, we develop them with curriculum. We developed our curriculum with subject matter experts, such as Patrice McLaurin, who is the author, image activist, and advocate for Black youth. There are 3 standalone modules in this course. And you're going, in the first lesson in the Untold Stories, they're going to learn about Juneteenth and affirmative action in a high level. And the question is raised as to why these significant historical moments often go untaught or misrepresented. And then in module 2, Black Business Titans, students are going to explore the theme of inequitable opportunity and the experiences of Black entrepreneurs who have had to work against privilege in order to overcome many obstacles and achieve business success. So the story is told from a first-person perspective as a young person makes plans for their own future. And then lastly, in module 3, we're going to now look at the great contributions made to medicine by Black people in the US, but also examine the injustices in access to and quality of medical care that exists now. So the entire course is doing a lot of video-based interviews like this, but also bringing and tying in the past to the present. And this all can be completed in an hour, no longer than 60 minutes, really. All right, so I do want to highlight this cultural literacy hub because I think it is super important to have this one-stop spot where teachers can access more resources. So if I actually could put the link, or maybe Caitlin can put the link into the chat, but we'll obviously provide this to you at the end of the presentation. So this is our hub where you're going to get a variety of resources to supplement your DEI curriculum, including digital lessons, toolkits, webinars, and a bunch of videos, even YouTube playlists for your students. Definitely worth checking out. All right, and then, so we also offer a course called Benign, Anti-Semitism. So in this course, it is for high school, so for grades 9 through 12. We understand that there has been a remarkable spike of anti-Semitism over the past few weeks. I think now more than ever, it's really important to introduce something like this to students where they're learning about navigating anti-Semitism and hate, and it's super important in teaching allyship. So we developed this course with the Anti-Defamation League, which is the primary body who tracks anti-Semitism acts across the world. What we are seeing is that there needs to be a greater understanding of cause for a call for inclusion, respect, and valuing diversity as we are closer proximity with each other in virtual and physical environments. So this course does not just focus on the Holocaust, but also on modern day anti-Semitism. There's going to be a connection between what happens in the past and what happens in the present. Get it? Kind of a focus clearly with our courses. And this is a way to bring in that past into the present with your students and create more of a deeper understanding. All right, let's go more into these lessons itself before I show you all how to access these courses with the remaining 15 minutes. So Benign is comprised of 4 digital lessons with a total seat time of about 50 minutes to complete this course. So students are going to learn about the history of Jewish immigration and anti-Semitism with a specific focus of how it evolved over time and persisted throughout many communities and via multiple facets of society, specifically religion, politics, and culture. Students are going to develop an understanding that the Jewish community is made up of many types of people, in no way monolithic, and all Jews have their own perspective on current events. And ultimately, they're going to explore how Jewish people may look for help from allies and what it means to be an ally to the Jewish community. So that is our suite of diversity, equity, and inclusion courses, but we do also offer social emotional learning resources that I believe blend very well with our DEI courses. And the reason for that is if you have a deeper sense of empathy and compassion for people, you're more likely to care about inclusion and equity, right? So I do want to highlight two social emotional learning resources that can be paired nicely with our DEI programs. The first one is our mental wellness basics course. Self-care and coping with stress is very important when being challenged with difficult ideas. And that's why I often see our mental wellness basics course being used in conjunction with our cultural literacy resources. So this resource is going to be divided up into 4 lessons, lasting about 10 to 15 minutes each. So very quick, can be finished in an hour. And it provides strategies to help you cope with challenges and aims to normalize the discussion of mental health concerns. And then in our character playbook, healthy relationships course, students are going to learn how to have respectful conversations. Super important. They're going to learn how to better understand and manage their emotions, how to communicate better with their peers, and how to have better or resolve conflicts in a more effective way. All these skills tie into culturally relevant teaching, and therefore we recommend them as a base to culturally responsive teaching. So this course can be completed in less than 3 hours with about 6 lessons, standalone lessons taking about 30 minutes each. And just a moment, I'm now going to show you how to access all these digital resources. Oh, let's not go there. I actually wanted to show it live. Or maybe I didn't. Yes, so what I wanted to show you all is how to sign up for an EVERFI account. I'm going to have Caitlin type it into the chat, so you can click on that link right in the chat, or just type it in your URL, everfi.com/new teacher. I'm now going to need to minimize because I'm going to pull up the dashboard. All right. So everybody is typing in right now, everfi.com/new teacher. Or you're going to, if you already have an account, you can go to everfi.net and log into your existing account. So once you're at everfi.com/new teacher, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see the option to choose teacher. Then you're going to need to pick your state. So I'm going to pick Maine. I'm going to find my school. Let's just make it easy. Portland High. Okay, I'm going to choose next. The next step is you're going to need to create your own profile. So put in your name and put in your school email address, and then create your password. Very important. Now it's going to show you a list of courses to choose. As I mentioned, EVERFI has so many, but I want you to all choose something relevant to what we learned today. So if we could all start out with our 306 African American History course, you may need to scroll all the way down to find that. But it's 306 African American History. We're going to choose that. We're going to click Agree to Terms of Service and Next. All right, next is you are going to be in your teacher dashboard. This is what your teacher dashboard looks like. If you don't have time, if I'm talking too fast or you just prefer to watch what I'm doing, that's fine. Again, there's a recording for this, and we're also going to provide you instructions on how to set up your account at a later time. But if you are in your teacher dashboard, this is exactly what it should look like, except for yours is going to say 306 African American History as the course you added. I have been up here. The first thing I want to show you all is how to access the rest of EVERFI's catalog. So if everybody can go into the catalog, you're going to see all of EVERFI's courses, and it's all going to be separated out for you by different topic areas. So the first topic area you're probably going to see is financial education. We're going to keep scrolling down. Then you're going to see social emotional learning and health and wellness, and we're going to keep scrolling down until we find our diversity, equity, inclusion bucket. That's where you're going to see all these courses. Mine say added because obviously I've added them to my account. Yours might most likely will say requests. So EVERFI believes that school district leaders should be empowered to determine whether EVERFI DEI courses are reflective of the needs of their community. So as such, you are going to need to choose the request link and get written permission from a school district leader in order to access these courses. And it shouldn't be a problem. I am certainly able to help you with that, but click on request. And as soon as I get that request, I'll send you out a Google form that you can share with your district to make sure that these courses are able to be added to your account. So click on request for any of the ones we talked about today: Diversity Foundations, BINA, 306 Continuing the Story. If you scroll over, you're going to now see some social emotional learning resources that we talked about that connect with it, and you should be able to add those no problem. Mental Wellness Basics you can add, Character Playbook you can add. All right, so that's the catalog in the nutshell. I want to use the last few minutes of our time to just go over some other important features of our dashboard. So inside the teacher dashboard, you're going to see the option to create a class. Very important. Students will not get access to EVERFI until you do this step. So first step is you click create class. All right, we're going to name it period 1 or whatever you want to name it. You can get started this month, sure. If you want to try it out with group of students, try it out. But I would say most of you might pick September or the new school year. Then you're going to choose your class size. After that, you're going to put in the grade level, and we're going to add the courses. All right, so I'm going to add African American history. I'm going to add Continuing the Story. I'm going to add Diversity Foundations, Character Playbook. I'm going to click add. All right, once I click add, it may take a bit. Theoretically, once I click add, it should populate a class code. It would say, okay, I did add it. There we go. And I'm clicking create in the top right-hand corner. There we go, registration code. So this is the code students are going to need. You would put it right up into your Google Classroom, because when they go to everfi.net and they say they're a student, they need this code right away to register. All right. Other important features of your teacher dashboard. In the home page, right next to where I just said create class, there's this view course tile. So when I click on view course, it opens up in a new page, the BINA course. As you can see, so many different modules, all interactive. It has this feature here where you know the progress of how far you are into the module. So if you want to go through the courses yourself, you can always click on that. And then I mentioned earlier the resources, super important. We give you assessment answers. We give you some planning resources like the curriculum guide and the facilitator guide. We give you discussion guides and parent letter. So check out those in the resources section. Last but not least, in the reports section, you are going to be able to track your progress of your students. So for example, Amy rocked this course. She got, I think she might be even on this call. Amy already went through all the lessons, and she got a passing score, and therefore she is certified. All of our courses certify you at the end if you get passing scores on each lesson. So now she can go into the students tab, and she can click print certificates. Right there, print now, and Amy, there's the certificate from EVERFI, our CEO signature right there. And that's just a fun incentive for them to try to do well in the program. All right, if you have any teachers you want to share EVERFI with, please feel free to do that in the invite a teacher button in the top right-hand corner. Maybe they couldn't make this webinar, but you think that they would be interested in EVERFI's courses. Share it like this, because you'll get a $15 Amazon gift card if they sign up and use a course. So we do appreciate any of your referrals. I'm going to go back to the presentation because that is it. That is all I wanted to show you. Let's see. All right, so we offer continued professional learning. So now that you are part of the EVERFI family, if you sign up for an account, you're probably going to get emails inviting you to various webinars. We have a really fun conference coming up. It's free, it's virtual, it's exciting. It's in July 21st, called Learn On. So feel free to go to our website, sign up for any upcoming events. We host webinars regularly with experts and subject matter experts and leaders on whole child education topics. And join our social media community. So that's how you are going to be able to stay up to date with any announcements. We do giveaways and contests. We give away lesson ideas, community chats. So Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. TikTok to be determined. Should be coming. All right, that's it. Any questions? I made it pretty good on time, actually. Let me see if I can figure out how to open up this Q&A.
Kayla, there is a question in there. I am unable to log into my existing EVERFI account. It has been a few years since I used it. Any suggestions for troubleshooting to get me back in?
Yes, so when you go to EVERFI.net and you put in your username, there's a button that says forgot password. Try that. If it does not email you your password, then in that case, email me. And here is my contact information. I'm going to actually put it into the chat too for everybody. There you go. All right, I'm also putting in my phone number here. Okay, so you guys can text me, call me, email me, set up a one-on-one. I know I kind of sped through a lot, but if you want to go in depth into any one course or how we're going to implement this, I can talk through strategies on an individual. I do a lot of virtual hangouts. So if you like Google Meet like me or Zoom, we can do that together too.
Kayla, same person said, I tried that, but the error message I received said the email was not recognized.
Oh, okay. Can you put it, you want to put in your email into the chat so I can see if you have an EVERFI account and I can follow up with you? We may have a different email for you on file. Or just email me and I'll figure it out for you. Anyone else have any questions? Oh, and Amy was on this. Awesome. Hey, Amy. Oh, Andrew. Yes, I've worked with you before.
Do we have, Kayla, I'm assuming you're willing to stick around and do a little bit of troubleshooting with people? Would that be, okay. So let's ask before we go down, Drew, if you can stick around for just a minute while we're still recording. Does anybody have any questions for kind of the good of the order that you want to answer that it might be helpful for others to hear? And then we can stop the recording and we can do a little bit more of specific troubleshooting help. And while you're thinking, if you have any questions, Kayla, can I like unofficially announce the big news that we've been working on for the next school year? Can we do like a soft announcement? So Kayla and I have been working, you will be seeing hopefully from me in the coming weeks, an announcement that instead of a series of PDs like we've been doing here, where it's a bunch of webinars, you know, one every week or two, we're going to develop cohorts for the entire year that you would be partnered with. You would sign up to work with one of our national organizations, and EVERFI is one of them. So we have EVERFI, the National Archives, the Gates Foundation, and Thinker Analytics. And we have teacher leaders who are going to be working. I'm thinking Amy might be one of the EVERFI teacher leaders. So we would do a series of trainings throughout the entire year where you would learn from, in this case, learn from EVERFI, and then work on a separate night as like a workshop thing. What did you learn? How do you apply it? What are you doing with that? And so by the time you get done, you would kind of have a good knowledge of all the EVERFI resources. You have worked with teacher leaders. You've thought about the applicable applications in your classroom, a bunch of certification hours, certificate from EVERFI and stuff like that. So look for that. Andrew asked for all of the, Kayla, would you be able to grab all of the links? Kayla is going to share a resource document that will be posted as well. Otherwise, is everybody, participants can chat with, if you hit the 3 dots, does everybody else have the option to save the chats? I know I do. I don't know if that's just a presenter. If where you type your message to the right, there's 3 dots. And if you click on that, you should be able to save chat. And so that would give you your own file, your own copy of everything that was posted. We can't save chat. Okay. All right, we will make sure any of the EVERFI links put out there that Kayla will get those all put together.
Yes, and Andrew, just so you know, your email was different in our system, so I'll put it in the chat there for you.
All right, so since we've made that big fun announcement, if you want to learn more about EVERFI, look in the coming weeks. You can spend a year looking at a series of potentially 4, 5, 6 webinars with EVERFI, and then supporting teacher leader kind of workshop type things. And so by the time you get to the end of the year, again, you'd have that wide gamut of resources in there.
Yes, I'm looking
So
forward.
that was me kind of stalling for time. If there's any questions, it doesn't seem like there's any specific questions to this. What I will do is I will thank Kayla and Caitlin for being here today. We'll shut the recording down, and then if there's any other troubleshooting, we can go from there. So now that I've said that out loud, hey, Kayla and Caitlin, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your passion and expertise with Maine educators, and thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate your support.
Thank you.